This week, Abhishek Agrawal from Material Security is with us to discuss how to protect your most important cloud services. Then in the security news, Google sues Badbox operators. Authenticated or unauthenticated? Big difference in my struggle to get LLMs to create exploits for me. Ring cameras that were not hacked. Malicious AURs killing solar farms. Weak passwords are all it takes. Microsoft's UEFI keys are expiring. Kali Linux and Raspberry Pi Wi-Fi updates. Use lots of electricity. Get a visit from law enforcement. Sharepoint vulnerabilities, nuclear weapons, and why you should use the cloud. This is the time to next exploit is short, I should say. Sonicwall devices are getting exploited. How not to vibe code and SMS blasters, all that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
Your company runs on Google Workspace, but it's an afterthought for most security tools. Material Security is the first and only platform purpose-built to protect Google Workspace, securing email, data, and user accounts from advanced threats. From blocking sophisticated phishing attacks in Gmail to preventing unauthorized app usage and fixing risky file sharing in G Drive, Material continuously protects your data. Don't settle for second best. Protect Google Workspace with Material Security. Learn more at securityweekly.com/material security. You can't protect what you can't see. Everyone knows that, right? That's why Run Zero gives you total visibility across your internal and external attack surfaces. Worried about unknown and unmanageable devices? They got those covered too. Run Zero also helps you illuminate all types of exposures, even the elusive ones. They go beyond CVEs to tackle the hard stuff, even 0 days. No agents, no authentication, just crazy deep data about your assets and exposures that focus on the risks that actually matter, not an endless sea of CVEs. Try it free. Visit securityweekly.com/run zero to get started. Coming to you from the Hacker Syndicate Studios, this is Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 884, being recorded on Wednesday, July 23rd, 2025. I am your host, Paul Asadorian, joined by Mr. Jeff Mann. What's up, Jeff? Oh, Jeff, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was trying to protect Sam from all that annoying nature sound in the background.
It's almost like I'm camping.
Good to be back. Good to be here. Miss you guys.
Mr. Sam Bound is here with us. Sam, welcome.
Good evening. Glad to be with you.
Don't forget to tune in live. You can visit our Discord server and get the live stream link. And if you're not in our Discord server, you can get an invite at securityweekly.com/Discord. We go live every Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. This segment is sponsored by Material Security. You can visit securityweekly.com/Material Security to see purpose-built Google Workspace, even in Office 365 security in action. With us today is Abhishek Agrawal, co-founder and CEO from Material Security. Abhishek, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It is nice to have you, my friend. It's good to have you on the show and talk about a very important topic because all our sensitive stuff is in G Suite and Microsoft Cloud, which is kind of scary once I verbalize that out loud. But Abhishek, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm one of the co-founders of Material and the CEO. Before this company, I was an early employee at Dropbox, where I actually more spent time on the data infrastructure side, where the security team was a big customer of ours internally. I ran the team along with my co-founder that managed the big giant data warehouse where like all Dropbox logs would get collected. And obviously security had an interest in using that data warehouse. This was also in the dark ages of, pre-Snowflake, pre-Databricks, where we had to run like a Hadoop cluster. So I don't really want to go back to those days ever again.
I don't hear people talking about Hadoop clusters anymore, Abhishek.
There's really no good reason to anymore. And then, before that, I started my career at Microsoft Research as an engineer. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So tell us. I know we had Ryan Noon on the show a long time ago now.
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure exactly when, but Ryan was on the show previously. But give us your story about how you helped start Material Security.
Yeah, it's a fun story. So Ryan and I, like I said, we were both at Dropbox together, running that data infrastructure team, and we were both getting to the point where we were ready for something new. And this was around the time that the 2016 election hacks happened, where there were some very high-profile email attacks, as you may remember, on like folks of the Hillary campaign, and
It was John Podesta.
John
right?
Podesta, that's right, the
Yeah.
Hillary campaign chairman, and.
I didn't actually remember that. I had it in my notes. Just want to throw that out there. I normally don't remember details like that.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if you did remember. It was kind of a big deal at the time. But basically, they hacked his personal Gmail account. They put all of his email on WikiLeaks. They like moved laterally to his iCloud and Twitter. It was bad. So we basically got kind of interested in that problem. It was kind of one of those classic like, why is this still a thing? Like we thought email security is this pretty solved thing, or like aren't there like multiple billion-dollar companies that do email security? So why is this still happening? And it got us kind of interested in it. And in particular, the fact that it was his Gmail account got us really interested because unlike a corporate email account, you can't change like DNS on at gmail.com. So we were like, the traditional kind of MX record based like filter emails thing. We were like, that doesn't really work on an at gmail.com account. So what can you do? And that was sort of the genesis of that question was the genesis of the company.
So you started off in email security.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting. You made pivot when you and I first met. I was like, hey, what are you guys doing now? And you're like, well, obvious progression, started in email security. And so now what are you guys up to?
Yeah. So actually, when we started the company, not only was it email security, but we kind of used to say it's email security, but not what you think. Because when people think email security, they think, yeah, you block phishing and stuff. And we were like, no, actually, what we do is we say, let's say someone is staring at your email, like they've gotten in, we don't really care how. Can we stop the damage that they would do? Can we like protect the content anyway? Can we stop them from resetting passwords? That's actually how we started. Over time, we did do email security exactly how you think. Like we added phishing and BC and malware and all the kind of like nasty emails that get by stuff, and the product like detects those. And then more recently, what we kind of realized is that email itself is obviously just one app that's part of like Office 365 or G Suite. So it turned out a lot of our customers were like, hey, I've got all these other problems when it comes to managing those platforms. Email is just one of them, but like, Google Drive and like my account security and like just managing settings and configuration is a pain. So we've sort of expanded into a lot of that as well over time. So got our start in email security, but not what you think. And these days it's more kind of cloud office security for those two platforms.
Yeah, it's interesting, Abhishek, when I think about, and I hate to say that like EDR is the end all be all security solution. However, like it's pretty great on endpoints. Like having that level of both visibility, detection, prevention, even on your endpoints is great.
Yeah.
There are so many areas where we don't have that same level of detection and prevention.
I was going to say, Paul, you need to define endpoint when you're going to make a bold statement like that.
Yeah. When I say endpoint, excuse me, I mean largely desktops and laptops, and so personal computing devices, and to a certain extent servers, right? So mobile phones, maybe your smart devices, sorta. I think the ecosystems have to be more resilient just because of the nature of those platforms. But when we move to things such as appliances, network devices, and then cloud applications, or in this case, like your cloud infrastructure, like the services you use to run your business, where's the EDR? And I think, Abhishek, is that like a roundabout way of getting down to like how you made the decision to expand into that area?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, I think there's kind of two ways to think about this, right? So one is like, recently we've been kind of, someone was talking to made this analogy to like AV and how it moved to EDR. And AV was like very narrow. It's on the endpoint, but it has like one job. It's like looking for, malware. And AV didn't go away. It just like transformed into EDR because it turned out like you needed to do more than just like hope that you could detect malware. You wanted like
Yeah. Hope that like
visibility.
your signature matches whatever they're doing
Yeah.
or the files that they dropped on your system.
And so
That was the early antivirus, and it was
right. So
only
like in
so.
the same way that like antivirus became like EDR, where you're not just hoping you can detect that malware, but you have some visibility, you have a bunch of other things. Like EDR solutions today even do like DLP and stuff, right? So it kind of expanded. And I think that analogy sort of applies to email security or cloud office security as well, where instead of just like hoping you can block the phishing email, like what else do you get that's adjacent to that, which is like, do you get visibility into what would happen if the attack actually succeeds? Do you get visibility into what vulnerabilities exist that the phishing email would actually exploit? It's very similar to kind of that evolution into EDR. The other way to think about it is almost like from a more practical perspective. If I have an agent running on the endpoint, what else can I do with it? I don't have to just scan malware. I can do other things. I can see like what operations are happening. I can like, that's why it's migrated into so many other use cases. There's a perfect analogy to that with modern API based email security. If I have an API connection into your Google Workspace and M365, why wouldn't I do more with that, right? Like I have those same APIs give me so much more than just scan email looking for a bad thing. Of course, I would look at the account settings. Of course, I would look at like the audit logs coming from those platforms. So you can just do more use cases with that single kind of integration point. And that's, I think, what the EDR providers realize as well. Like if I have something running in the kernel or on the endpoint, I can just do more from a security perspective. So whether you think about it kind of top down or bottoms up, like the result is the same, which is like there's just more to the problem.
And it's a rich attack surface, obviously, in a huge ecosystem for your company, right? I ran Security Weekly, and we use G Suite, and that was our platform, for a lot of things. That includes not just email, but Google Drive, the love-hate relationship we have with Google Drive, but it's also your sometimes single sign-on or authenticator if you haven't replaced it with something fancier. Right? Your employees are using it to authenticate to things. What else is in there for G Suite? It's calendar.
Yeah.
It's meetings. I mean, it's like the thing that helps run your company probably the most in terms of a cloud platform, no?
Well, in some ways, like you're not even a company until you get a G Suite or Office 365 set up, right? So like it really is that fundamental thing. I mean, one of the thought experiments we like to joke about is like, since you're mentioning EDR and endpoints, like honestly, like what would you rather lose, like your Google Workspace account or your laptop? And like if like terrible choice, hopefully neither, but like if I had to give you that choice, which one would you pick? And I think for
totally lose my laptop.
Yeah. Because like, okay, you lost your downloads folder, but like, the actual stuff where everything lives is in G Suite. So I think it is interesting that when we think about security programs, especially like you kind of think about like cloud network, you think about your endpoint, and then there's this like distant, thought about like maybe your actual like cloud office suite, even though all of us would agree that we would way rather like lose our endpoint than our cloud office. So I think, honestly, this is probably because these platforms are still, I know it sounds ridiculous, but they're still relatively new compared to some of those other surfaces in like corporate environments. And they're also new in terms of the accessibility via APIs. So there's just like a lot to do there. They're very rich surfaces, like you said. They're very ubiquitous. Like I feel like, when you talk to folks in IT or security, it's like, it's one of the few apps that's like literally wall to wall, right? Like everybody has a license to it. It's the first thing you give someone when they join your company. It's the last thing you take away when they leave. So it's a pretty big surface.
And use the acronym CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management. Is that the space that you're playing in, or is that subdivided into like I'm writing my own apps in the cloud and I need something versus I'm just using cloud apps that come from Google or Microsoft?
Yeah, I think when people like say CSPM, they're normally talking about like the public cloud, right? Like so, like AWS, GCP, Azure. So and more like the services they're running in those cloud environments. That's not really what we focus on at all. So we're not definitely not in that space where we're trying to like help patch vulnerabilities in your AWS. Or,
Mm.
we're talking about your cloud Office suite, so Office 365 or Workspace. And maybe to our earlier point, I don't think there is an acronym that's like
Yeah,
the CS,
sure.
but this is sort of like the CSPM or the EDR equivalent for your cloud Office suite, where we think there's like email security is part of it, DLP is part of it, like account security, making sure you're like the identities in Google Workspace and M365, that's part of it. But like, it's kind of still being defined, to be honest.
Mm.
So
Well,
where does this
certainly.
run?
Go
I
ahead,
mean,
Sam.
yeah, I mean, if you have Office in the cloud, you don't have a server to run software on, right? You're just using the services they give you. Where's your products running? It must be running on server somewhere.
Yeah, so our product runs in like a cloud project, right? Like we happen to use GCP, and we are connecting to the customer's Office environments via the
Yes.
APIs that those environments have. So the access is via the native APIs those products have. Um, and then as far as the deployment model goes, one thing that's kind of interesting is if you are talking to someone's like most sensitive data via the APIs, that's like in G Suite or M365, you kind of don't want to be the weakest link yourself. So we actually deploy in single tenant instances for most of our customers, where we are running in a cloud environment that is entirely isolated and it's for them, because we don't want to be like the weakest link in the picture by ourselves being this like big giant honeypot of like access to all these. But to answer your question, yeah, it's API based, so we are running on our own as a cloud service and then connecting via APIs to the customer's environments.
That's pretty interesting. So the email doesn't go through your server. It goes to Gmail, and then your server fetches it to look at it.
That's right. Yeah. And so, and by the way, we're not the only ones doing that anymore. There's a ton of API-based email security products out there.
Yeah.
And they all kind of realize this, which is like, it's just a lot nicer to be able to integrate via API, like single click versus change your like DNX records. And
Yeah.
especially like security teams have a lot of gray hair from, like these services where email would flow through them. And so if they went down, like all of a sudden your like company's email is down. So there's a lot to like about API based email security. And there's a whole wave of products there, including ourselves. But to my earlier point, if I have an API connection to your workspace to scan email, why wouldn't I use that API connection for a bunch of other things like Google Drive and all these other like problems that you have to think about also?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like OAuth is a big problem.
Yes.
Across the board.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. OAuth is huge. I mean, like, in the kind of vein of like, I mean, identity is the new perimeter or whatever you want to call it, like that trope.
Mhm.
Like, I don't even need to phish you and like steal your credentials and any of that. I just need you to like OAuth an application that is malicious, and like you will just like in the session hand over full access to your like mailbox, to your drive, etc. And it's really hard. It's one of those situations where like, what's a security team going to do at scale? Like block all OAuth applications? Like, that's
Yeah.
difficult because there's
Because you're like, oh, I didn't give my password to the attacker. I'm like, yeah, but you granted him OAuth, and in the definition of that protocol, it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah, I remember this breach back in my Dropbox days. It was absolutely terrible. It was an OAuth application that Google somehow allowed. It was registered with the Google Apps logo as
Mhm.
its logo, and it was called Google Docs. And it's
Oh,
like,
God.
but it was a third-party app, and it was just someone like, basically registered that app as an OAuth app, and it got everybody. Like Dropbox had like, at least 200 people affected by this worm, because it was just like, it like sent you a notification that was from Google because it's for our OAuth app, and it
Mhm.
looked like Google, and you gave it access to your email and Drive, and like it literally has like scopes to take all of the data, and like that's it. You're never getting it back. So that's actually like one of the motivations around this whole idea of like, you get into my email or you get access to it somehow, can we still protect the really sensitive crown jewels in there?
Right.
Because it's not about just phishing emails, right? Like there's just many other ways into the account.
Yeah, 100%. So Abhishek, what do you do to protect Google Drive? Because I have lots of concerns about Google Drive
Yeah.
usability aside, right? And Gemini aside. Let's put both those things aside for now.
Yeah.
But just like generally, keeping a bunch of basically sensitive data in Google Drive.
Yeah.
Like without your product, was there ways to protect that, or
Yeah,
is it
like
super
so,
hard, right?
the biggest problem we see when we talk to customers about Google Drive is just like the sprawl, right? So like,
Mhm.
we're kind of all familiar with the thing you kind of make fun of, like, oh, there's this like S3 bucket that was like open to the internet and had all this data, and you're like, how could they be so silly? And then it's like, but then look at Google Drive in every company, and there's like thousands and thousands of files, like with anyone with the link sharing, right? And
Yep.
it's like kind of the exact same thing.
Because the
So
user can define the permissions
yeah,
for it.
and like
I mean, if there's no guardrails, they can put whatever permissions they want on it.
right. And there are some admin controls where you can kind of like block certain types of sharing, but then the problem is that they're so like coarse that you're just going to like run into like productivity problems where you're blocking users unnecessarily. So
Well, yeah, because a lot of it's time based. Just
exactly.
and I think Jeff is pointing this out, that the confidentiality and sensitivity of information is oftentimes time based.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a great example to talk about. This is where my concerns lie. Is that we do a lot of vulnerability research at my day job at Eclipsium,
Yeah.
and I'm like, there are certain data for a certain period of time that has to remain very confidential, and then like slowly as your disclosure timeline unfolds, that can become more and more public.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do you manage that in Drive, right? That's a
Right.
huge,
And so
not just we don't have that problem, everyone has that problem.
yeah, it's a very common problem. And the problem is that the built-in tools are just not granular enough. So like, for example,
Yeah.
they'll let you say something like, if there are social security numbers in this file, like, through some black box detection, revoke all of the access entirely. And what you really want is something that's like a little bit more granular. So what we do is basically when we first connect to a customer's My Drive or shared drives, we basically build an index that is like that understands what files are in there, what permissions they have. And then optionally, we can also scan the content to try to identify what's sensitive. And once you have that index, you can essentially let people write very granular detections on top of that index. So you can say things like, hey, if a file has this type of sensitive content and it's shared with the whole organization and it lives in this shared drive and it is older than this amount of time, then take these actions, right? So you basically create like something that is a lot more manageable. And then the other thing is,
Abhishek, can you use AI to help classify that and then feed it in? Because I feel like LLMs are pretty good. They're bad at some things, right? But pretty good at going, like, other than just looking for keywords, if something looks like it's a vulnerability disclosure, apply these rules to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can do, labeling of the files, and to your intuition, like LLMs are really good for that. And in fact, like you were mentioning Gemini earlier, and like Google actually has a pretty cool feature for labeling files in Google Drive automatically with Gemini. The problem is it relies on a training period where you're supposed to get your like end users to label files for a while. And like precisely no one does that. So what you actually might want to do in those situations is build like a policy that auto labels certain files to almost jumpstart the Gemini training, and then like use the Gemini tagging. But again, let's say you have like perfectly labeled files. What do you do with those labels? You still need to like be able to write like essentially queries on top of them that then can take some remediative action. So, the kinds of things that we allow you to do are basically identify very granular conditions, and then also take certain actions. So like notifying users, for example, and saying, hey, did you actually mean to leave this open, like with anyone in the link permissions? Like if you say no within like Slack or something, we can kind of go revoke that access on your behalf, or we can like update permissions on your behalf and things like that. So it's like defining these policies and then orchestrating a response to them so that a security team isn't like sitting around and having to like stare at a screen that says 6 million files have external permissions. Like, good luck triaging them. You're never going to do that.
Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious. How deep can you go with attachments, particularly, photos, scanned images, where it's documentation? Do you have the ability to do an optical scan on the fly type of thing? And
we do. Yeah, and we actually, ironically, we leverage like I mentioned earlier, we run inside GCP. So for a lot of things, we can actually leverage a service inside GCP called the Google DLP API, where they have this API. I imagine it using a ton of different types of ML models under the hood, but essentially, like you give it blobs of data, and different types of information types that you'd like to identify, like, passport numbers, driver's licenses, whatever. And it actually helps identify them, and it supports things like OCR. So yeah, we leverage those. But, data sprawl, and in particular, the combination of sensitive data and like poor ACLs is the specific problem with Google Drive that we really look at. And that tends to be the thing people worry about the most. And then especially as they are like trying to roll out something like Glean or connect like OpenAI to their drive or whatever, they're terrified of ACLs being wrong, because that's what the LLM thinks is the source of truth for like, well, who has access to what, right? So
Yeah.
like you may have a file that is open to the whole org that didn't really matter because no one was like searching for it anyway. But now you have like, if you have like a Gen AI search or enterprise search product, it's basically assuming that everybody in the company has access to it. So the next time it gets a prompt, it's happy to give you that information.
It's happy to give you that information. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
in addition to data protection, though, and privacy, there's also malicious configuration changes, which I think is super interesting because it's one of the incident response that I did for a friend, right? And it was probably still super common, where if an attacker gets credentials into your O365 environment, or whatever Microsoft calls it now, we'll just say 365 because I can't keep up with all the name changes. But in 365, access to one account allows an attacker to manipulate rules and configuration to change, for example, the way email behaves.
Right.
And can route email. And the attack, it was basically a local like watch shop. It may be 2 stores, probably less than 10 employees, maybe 10, right? And what they did was they were intercepting emails, but they were able to do that via the changes they had made. And when I started doing the analysis, I was like, wow, this is super, I'm talking to my friends, I'm like, this is super common. But now you expand that out into the number of configuration points you have in a 365 or G Suite environment.
Yeah.
Man, is that overwhelming?
Well,
right?
so
I'm assuming that's one of the things you can help with, right?
100%. I mean, this really goes back to that analogy that we started the call with, around EDR. And I mean, let's put it this way. Like let's say there's an attack. It starts with an initial access point that is a phishing email, extremely common, obviously. But like once the phishing email is delivered and it succeeds, if you are kind of email security product, like your visibility into the attack ends there. It's like you looked at the email, you figured out if it was bad or not, and then that's it. But to your point, if someone actually like gets the credentials and gets into the account, now they're going to do things like they'll set up a mail rule to hide their tracks. They will go over to Google Drive because they don't care that it's one session. So like they're going to like open up Google Drive and go there. They'll start doing downloads. They may request a takeout, which is like Google's service for giving you the whole thing.
The whole thing, all the data.
They may send new malicious emails. They may try to like reset passwords. So what happens is that's kind of the EDR kind of analogy coming into play, because you really want visibility that's like not just about that one malicious email, but all the like surrounding activity that happens. And then it's like, why did the phishing email succeed in the first place? Oh, because even though the account had MFA, it actually had a weak form of MFA, or it had an application specific password, which is like this thing in Google like called ASPs that like Midnight Blizzard has recently been talking about, or they've been like compromising. So like knowing how the exploit happened in the first place because there was some vulnerability, then seeing the phishing email that actually used it, and then seeing any follow-on activity that happens if the attacker succeeds, it just gives you many more detection points and response points versus hoping you catch every phishing email, which is like, a little bit folly.
It's not going to happen. We have a story about I think it was a UK company that had one weak password, and the attackers were able to, Akira was able to ransomware the whole company. And so that stuff happened. So that visibility is super important, right? To that whole chain, especially.
Yeah. And if you're like a very sophisticated detection engineering team, then what you're going to do is like, you're going to take the audit logs from Google or Microsoft, you're going to put them in a SIM, you're going to write your own detections, you're going to do network enrichment, you're going to try to correlate it with other activity. Like, for example, to your point, you're going to also sync settings from accounts, and you're going to look for setting drifts and try to correlate these things. And, that's the stuff that it's just hard to do. And like a lot of organizations don't have the bandwidth or like the time to do that stuff. And so a lot of what our product does is try to give them that detection coverage out of the box. And then the other thing it does, which like even the most sophisticated detection engineering teams struggle to do, is they're not going to ingest like all of content into their SIM, right? Because like they would bankrupt the company. So like the content visibility, like knowing what's sensitive in email, knowing what's sensitive in files, if you then further correlate with that, that becomes really interesting.
Yeah, because it's when you were explaining that, it was going through my head that, users update rules for their email sometimes. Users sometimes use takeaway to get the files. But those things correlated together.
Yeah.
That's where the knowledge you really want. It's
That's
knowledge,
right.
it's not just data or information.
Yeah.
It's knowledge at that point.
Yeah, it's like an overused word in security, but it's the context, right? Like context is king at the end of the day, and just knowing that these three things happen together is like the thing that's really important. And so that's kind of what pushed us in this direction. Because we were like, if we want to correlate some of these things together, we need visibility into the different parts of the suite, and that has to go broader than email. It just has to. And even with Drive, something like, okay, you have file download activity. Then if it's a Google Workspace company, maybe they're using Chrome, and maybe it's like managed Chrome, which means now that you have Chrome logs that you can further correlate. So now you can, so like there's just a lot of visibility you get. You mentioned Google or Microsoft acting as identity, so you know which apps they have access to. So if they're like connecting a new app, it's just this really rich point where a lot of things kind of come together. And if you can get like an integration into that point, it's just like a really, really important set of protections you can deploy.
Abhishek, I haven't asked these 5 questions of a guest in quite some time because we have been doing a lot of interviews, and so I'm kind of excited now. I get to ask you 5 questions. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Yeah, let's do it.
3 words to describe yourself.
Oh man, pragmatic. Let's see, optimistic, which is rare in security sometimes, and dad. I don't know.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Ooh. Rope is the first thing that came to mind for some disturbing reason.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Oh man, that's a tough one.
I forgot how hard these questions are.
That was a really hard one. I don't know. It's like there's some deep psychological searching going on in my head right now.
Yeah. We're going to put it all in an LLM at the end of the day.
You'd be surprised at the results we've been getting.
All right.
I don't know. Man in spite of himself or something. I don't know.
What is your favorite hacker movie?
Oh, probably Swordfish. I know it's a cliche, but I like that movie.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents. Alive,
dead, fictional, or otherwise.
This is the hardest one. I didn't prep you for this one.
I don't think you prepped me for any of these.
No, I didn't. I didn't prep you for any of these. Yeah,
they were all pretty hard.
2 celebrities. Let's see. You said dead or alive, right?
Dead or alive, yeah. Really, any fictional character. It's a very loose interpretation of celebrity. A celebrity in your own mind, as Larry likes to say.
Well, one of my favorite authors, I'll just pick him, Jorge Luis Borges, the Argentinian author. And then,
nice.
Let's see, second parent. I don't know, Julia Roberts.
There you go. Abhishek, thank you so much for coming on Paul's Security Weekly. It was great having you.
Thank you. That was awesome.
With that, we'll take a short break, come back with the security news. Stay tuned. Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control on every executable that can happen in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind. Visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. Whenever we talk to security teams, one thing is clear. They are under more pressure than ever, facing increasingly complex and higher stakes threats. That's where Flashpoint comes in. Flashpoint empowers organizations to make mission-critical decisions to keep their people and assets safe. Flashpoint combines cutting-edge technology with expert intelligence teams, empowering security leaders with the critical data and alerts and analysis needed to act before threats escalate. And with Ignite, Flashpoint's award-winning threat intelligence platform, you get access to real-time insights, finished intelligence, and analytics all in one place. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Flashpoint. And we are back with the security news. Jeff and Sam is here. We didn't get Lee, huh? We didn't get Lee.
No.
Lee was having power issues. Yeah. Where do you guys want to start? We can start. You know what? Let's start at Badbox. Did you guys see the story where Google is suing the Badbox operators?
Yeah.
Heard about it, didn't see it.
It was kind of interesting. Some of the initial articles I read were like way too like high level, and I was like, I want to know more details. And then there's details in the court filings, but those are difficult to navigate to. And the one website that it sent me to said I need to pay money to like unlock the rest of the court files. So then I just started prompting LLMs, mostly to get all their versions of the same story, which I did. So I was able to piece it together. So Google filed a lawsuit against the operators of Badbox 2. Now, Badbox 2 is that botnet that we've talked about several times on the show, where they're pre-infecting Android TV, set-top boxes, televisions, and other such entertainment devices with malware, usually to take advantage of the ad network, maybe do some spying. There's been a lot of analysis. I wrote an article and ripped some of these devices apart myself. That's on the Eclipsium website. So Google started looking at the traffic and was updating Google Play Protect to block the Badbox-related malware. I want to say some of them use Android that doesn't use Google Play Protect, or somehow I think that was the case when I looked into it. So a lawsuit was filed in New York citing computer fraud, or the CFAA, RICO violations, which I think is fantastic, by the way. That's how we got the mob. In intellectual property infringement, aiming to seize the syndicate's resources, disrupt their operations. The FBI issued an alert. So who were they filing this against? And there are 25 defendants from China. And so it's interesting. That's where they traced it back to. To me, that was the new piece of information.
Well, this might not be new, but how did they manage to infect these devices in their original manufacture process?
Well, apparently it was 25 people from China.
So they were working at the companies? Yeah, I mean,
Could be.
Yeah.
It's like a little piece of information, Sam. I still have your outstanding question of how they're infecting them. Yeah. Like now we know roughly who and where they're from. So 25 people from China were the ones that they discovered. At least those are the ones that they're indicting. And then we don't know how they're infecting the malware, but we know what the malware looks like and what it does, and what Google is doing to combat that in a little more detail. But there's still some missing pieces of the puzzle. It's good.
So where did you say they filed this?
They filed this in a New York court of law.
All right.
So yeah, how many smart TVs are infected anyway? I don't have one. Is there any way to infect a smart TV? Can you install an app on it?
Yeah, some of the smart TVs are just Android. I have some from, I forget which manufacturer, but it's just Android running on the, SBC, single board computer inside the TV that
it's
runs
just
Android.
A really big monitor.
Yep.
Pretty much.
Think of it that way.
And I guess Google Play Protect would be your main defense, but that would only be if your TV actually meets Google standards, which a lot of them
if it actually implements Google Play Protect. Correct.
Right.
I think that's a developer option when you roll up Android.
Well, it's when I know for phones, you have to meet certain standards, like you can't have USB debugging turned on and other things. And if you want to, you can make a cheap device using open source Google, but you won't be allowed to put Google Play or anything on it.
Right.
So this would probably be the cheapest TVs, I would think.
Yeah. The TVs I have, I believe, have Google Play on them.
And therefore, they should have Play Protect, which should give you some defense against this.
But I wonder, can you build Android with Google Play but not enable Play Protect? Does Google let you do that?
I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that. I know it's like some apps, there's a attestation API, so apps like Netflix, to protect against copyright infringement and theft, pirating, they use the attestation API and other things to go, what kind of device am I running on? If, for example, you're running on a jailbroken device, then the app won't install.
That's right. So, and that would violate, you cannot sell it in a jailbroken state, or Google won't let you put Google Play on it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think, going back to the lawsuit, though, I think the purpose of this indictment is to get the U.S. court to bless Google taking down the botnet. I don't believe that anyone from Google, law enforcement, or any of us that have read this believe that we'll actually indict 25 people or even one person from China.
Well, they'd have to extradite them.
Yeah. They would have to extradite. That's what I mean. Extradite, Jeff. Sorry, I used the wrong word there. Yeah, extradite.
So were the TVs manufactured in China? I guess that would make more sense.
Yeah, so it's not just TVs, but TV set-top boxes that you can buy on Amazon really cheap.
And was there somebody watching them make the TVs? Of course, that's bleeding into another store.
Well, it could be that Samsung has their own ecosystem for it. They actually use a different version of Linux. But let's just say you're manufacturing the TV outside of the country of China, and you're like, oh, I need smart TV functionality. Well, from China, I'm going to order that single board computer that gets stuffed inside the TV that runs Android. And so during the manufacturing process, they're backdooring it and then shipping it over to whatever country is putting the TV together. And that's how it happens. Be my guess.
I'm surprised they didn't throw a tariff in, because they seem like they're throwing the kitchen sink in this lawsuit. Let's try a little this and a little this.
Well, and I think that, they're probably going wide in the lawsuit to get whatever they can. Again, with I think the main goal being like, hey, can we just turn this botnet off? Which, I mean, that's a temporary measure, as we've seen. I think we'll talk more about this next week in the context of ransomware. But this tends to disrupt for a period of time until such time they can rebuild or adjust the infrastructure. Hopefully it slows them down. Well, it still irks me, though, that we are lacking details on this story. So this is, again, a little more information than before, but I still feel like we're lacking some details. Which, maybe as the court proceedings go forward, we might get more, but probably not. It's also just good to see Google taking steps to combat this, because I think it was like, you asked the number, I think it was 10 million devices, not just TVs, set-top boxes, other such entertainment devices, but it was like 10 million in the botnet. And so that grows to a number where people start taking advantage. But the striking thing for me is just how long they've been able to continue this operation of backdooring these set-top boxes and Android devices. And it's been a battle for the apps on those devices, because let's say when you get the device, like I read about this and researched it, when you get the device, it has this app XYZ. You, let's say, root the device, you pull the APK, you reverse engineer it, you run it through virus total, the whole thing, and it goes, this app is completely innocuous. Then the app gets updated and malicious software and functionality slips in the app. Now the app is bad. So how do you play the cat and mouse game on Android of, how do I know? I can't just say an app is bad or good. I have to constantly, I think that's the point of Play Protect, right? I have to constantly be monitoring these applications.
Well, you can run antivirus on Android devices. I don't know about these smart TVs. Another thing.
Oh,
that I
yeah.
wonder-
We toyed with that. I was
Yeah.
like, can I put like some kind of anti-malware? I forget who. Is it with
A bunch
Secure?
of them are out there.
Some of them are pretty good on Android.
Blowbox was
And
the
if you-
first.
Yeah, and if you can run that on your Android TV device, you got a better chance anyway.
Well, another thing occurs to me is what harm does this do? If you're an end user and your TV is pre-owned, what is it doing? Is it stealing your credit card number or your password or just participating in a DDoS attack or what?
Mostly it's, I think, monetizing via ad tracking networks. However, I did see code in there that the malware was collecting SSIDs and passwords. So there could be, so the thing that is interesting is if this does trace back to China, that means I think it's probably less likely to be a monetization effort and more likely to be spying, in my opinion. And I did see some evidence of spying.
Well,
So
the article
would that really
that
hurt
you're,
you? Go ahead.
sorry. Oh, the article that you posted refers to it orchestrating DDoS attacks.
That too.
But I
Yep.
was kind of wondering the same thing that Sam was like, what's the end game for doing all this stuff? Are they hoping that these things fall into the hands of government agencies and they can somehow do some sort of espionage, as you said?
Yeah, but I don't see what value knowing a bunch of random TV watchers would be for espionage.
Right.
But
Well, it's a foothold.
Yeah.
It's a foothold into our infrastructure, similar to TP-Link and others.
Well, sure. Then you
Router,
scan them
home
and
routers.
try to find the TVs that are in the home of somebody like in the government that might know something. That could be, but that would mean 90% of the users to have nothing to worry about. Really, they aren't going to be hurt by this.
Yeah, I guess in the case of internet routers in consumer settings, if you wanted to cause disruption, you just turn them all off. It's not that much of a disruption if it's TV devices. But you can still use them for shooting information around as part. You have got basically now multiple botnets under control that have served different purposes. So this could be one, I think it has that advantage that you can be very stealthy, right? I think this is why they do it. Is that not many people, until a bunch of us nerds started figuring it out, based on network traffic, that malicious stuff was coming from a router, that we started tearing them apart. But like most users don't think about, like you said, Sam, putting AV antivirus on their Android TV box or doing anything. They just, it's an appliance, so I don't need to worry about security.
Well, I have two thoughts. One is, I wonder if it's some sort of just proof of concept type of thing where they would like to do botnets that target something that would be more devastating.
I think it's moved beyond that because this has a rich history, Jeff.
Or is it possible that this is just sort of, another layer of white noise that we're just supposed to do what we're doing now? What's the big deal? Let's just move on. And yet, there'll be another one that, it's just a botnet, but it's really targeting something. It's just
they could change, but to your point, Jeff, they could change functionality. Just like they swap apps out for malicious versus not malicious.
Right.
It's a foothold that can be whatever they want it to be. Just kind of scary.
Well, that doubles back to them. It's more of a proof of concept or a beta test. Can we do it this way? Yes. Okay. Now what do we want to?
Yeah,
Really
let's make some money. Let's do some DDoS.
You could take over TV and broadcast max headroom.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I theorized in my early presentations about embedded security before we called it IoT. I recalled that scene from the movie Idiocracy, where he's watching that in the movie, the popular TV show that's called Ow My Balls. You remember that from the movie? And he's watching the TV, and all around the TV. So the actual video or show he's watching is just the middle of the screen, and then all on the outside of that, on the TV set, are advertisements.
Yeah, there used to be an ISP. Yeah. Was it Net Zero? There was an ISP that would do that. They would give you free internet service.
Net Zero, right?
Yeah.
But they injected ads. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's slightly different. I mean, they are doing some malicious advertisement, but I think they're just click simulating to get ad clicks from the apps that are on your Android TV device, not displaying them out to the end user, although conceivably that would be possible.
Yeah, so that does harm the advertiser, but it doesn't harm the end user. They wouldn't notice a problem.
Correct.
Yeah.
Hence it having some pretty good stealth.
Yeah.
Sorry, I gotta adjust here. I'm having technical difficulties here in the studio.
Does that mean you
That's
lost
the way
the
it
bottle
always is.
opener?
No, I don't want to talk about it. The next one I was looking at is actually the Ubiquiti Unify vulnerability that lets attackers inject malicious commands. It's interesting. In the CVSS score that Ubiquiti posted, if you look at the scoring, they list it as an unauthenticated vulnerability. However, if you dig into the details of it and use an LLM to write an exploit like I did, it definitely requires authentication. I mean, if you look in the article from SEC Console, they give you the snippet of vulnerable code in the PHP web interface on Ubiquiti devices, and then they give you the GET request with all the HTTP headers that you need to send. And in there, there's a stuff for like a cookie session ID. And I'm like, that tells me you need to be authenticated. But I'm like, wait, if I have the host header or the HTTP header, and in the host header is where the command injection is, I'm like, if I have all that, I'm like, can't I just go to an LLM and say, hey, take this GET request and write a Python exploit for me? And LLMs did not like that at all. Like, they were not jumping at the chance to help Paul write an exploit. So then I'm like, all right, I'm not going to win this argument. I'm not even going to bother. I just argue with it a little bit. And then I was like, okay, just create a Python script that does this. And like, I took the string out that was the command injection. It was like, oh, totally happy to create a Python script for you, Paul. Then I edited that Python script and I put a little semicolon after the value of the IP address in the host header, and I put my command in there, and then I saved it and I ran the exploit. And I was like, oh, but it comes back and it says like 403 unauthorized. Is 403 the unauthorized? Whatever the HTTP status code is for unauthorized. It was like, you're unauthorized. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, and first I created it though, because on the Ubiquiti Cloud keys, there's a redirector from port 80 to 443. So it forces you to use SSL. And so I had to, I think it was it Gemini? I think it was Gemini. I'm like, oh, go rewrite that, but do SSL support. And then it was like, oh, the certificate's not valid, so I can't connect to it. And then I had to go back to Gemini, and I'm like, put the stuff in there, because I don't remember what it is. I'm like, put the stuff in there that ignores certificate warnings. It's like 2 lines of Python code. And then I pasted those in, and I was like, oh, and then it says I have to be authorized. So I don't, to me, this isn't unauthenticated. Unless I'm missing something.
That sounds right. But this is pretty common that in the early days of a vuln disclosure, there's conflicting reports and errors.
Right.
But it sounds like that CVSS should be like 7 instead of 9.8.
Yeah, it's super weird. Again, unless I'm missing something. But I used an LLM to write the exploit, which is also like super annoying that LLMs won't do that for you. I'm like, I'm giving you the exploit is already public. I just need you to turn it into a Python script. Like anyone can. I'm not asking you to go reverse engineer something and then write the exploit. Even still, we should have tools available that do this, because guess what? The attackers are using tools that do this. I would imagine.
Are they?
I don't think I have
maybe
proof of
maybe
that,
they have the same problem with their LLM.
Well, you can just do this with burp or curl.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
I was just trying to make it easy on myself with Python and give me something I can easily modify, which I did.
Yeah. Well, you can right-click in burp and it'll write to Python too.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's a million things that can take basically an HTTP request and make a Python script out of it. It's very easy to do. But yeah, I mean, that's how easy this exploit was. So Like my first one, make sure you patch it, right? But again, I don't think it's unauthenticated.
Yeah.
Well, Ring cameras were hacked, but they weren't hacked. The report was they were hacked.
I saw that
Jeff,
story.
you had this story too.
I did. I'm like, oh, Paul, Ring cameras. Let's do it. But yeah, I caught the same thing you did. It was just a feature.
It was a bug or a feature. I mean, I guess the developers would call it a feature.
Yeah.
I didn't read through all the details about the bug, but people were noticing like weird things happening with their account and attributing it to, oh my God, I've been hacked. But it turns out the back end in the cloud just had some kind of bug.
Right. So there was no apparent malicious intent or activity, but yeah, people were seeing weird screen capture or snapshots
Submitting,
stills
yes, yep.
that were getting put in weird places.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I can't fault users of Ring cameras and similar devices for being on guard, because that is a very common tactic, or at least it used to be, for attackers to steal credentials and log into people's cameras. There was a whole, it goes down to like a really dark and disgusting hole too, where they were hacking into people's cameras and selling access and things like that. So it definitely is a target of cyber criminals for sure.
So not really the contents of what's in the field of vision of the camera, but it's the credentials associated with the
Oh no,
camera.
they were trying to monetize the contents of what the camera was creating, using them to spy on people.
But a door camera?
Yeah, door camera. Well, Ring also makes it regular cameras too.
Okay. Because I'm like,
Pretty much no one just makes a doorbell anymore. That was kind of how Ring got their start, but they all make cameras now, because you can buy the stuff cheap from China and have it manufactured. Imagine that.
I just can't think of anything that ever would happen at my front door that would be sensitive. But maybe if somebody showed up, like maybe if somebody's having an affair or something like that, and the person's coming in the front door,
Could be. Someone could be podcasting from their front porch,
or the kiss cam happens to be
the
a
kiss
Ring
cam.
camera.
Yeah.
Do Ring doorbells run Android?
Not to my knowledge. I haven't reverse engineered a Ring camera. Wouldn't surprise me if it ran Linux. I think one might be surprised if you started lifting the cover. Maybe not, but you start lifting the covers on all sorts of devices, and you're like, oh, it's just Linux. But also, sometimes the answer is, oh, it's just Android, which, I mean, is Linux, but a highly customized version, right?
Yeah, if I was Google, I would tell everybody to use Android on everything to make my life simpler. But anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I'd support multiple OSs.
What I recommend, and so this started becoming a thing when people started abusing account credentials to get into everyone's cameras. All the camera manufacturer companies started adding multi-factor authentication to log into your account. And that is right now the best way to protect your account and your camera systems so I've done that like on all of my smart devices. If there's two-factor, and even if it's crappy SMS, I still enable it.
So if we ever do T-shirts again, Paul, we should have, we drink because you don't enable MFA.
Yeah.
But that assumes they didn't put malware in the code at the factory.
This is true. Ring used to be really good. So, like, I've had Ring doorbells. So I had an original one and then a replacement, just because I actually got one for free, and I ended up upgrading my Ring camera. And then also I redid the front of my house twice. But the first time I did it, I buried the doorbell wire in the thing, because I was like, oh, I'll just I want a smart doorbell. And then I realized that I needed the power, the 48 volts that comes from those cables to power the Ring doorbell. So when I redid it again, I found the cable, and then with a ladder and a multimeter, I was able to figure out how to wire my doorbell to send the Ring the 48 volts I think it's 48 volts that it needs to operate. So now I don't have to charge my doorbell anymore or run some silly cable from it into the outlet outside anymore. But in all that time, so I've had a Ring for a long time, I've never had to do a manual firmware update. They have always done unattended auto upgrades of their firmware. And I feel like they need a round of applause for sticking with that, because that's not very many devices out there that are constantly doing an unattended automatic firmware update. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And you never even had to restart it or anything, right?
Nope, I don't do anything to firmware. I've never had to do a firmware update on my Ring, to my knowledge. Maybe I'm missing the boat on it, but at least I know back in the day, because they had some kind of security incident around the time when they were first starting in the first few years of the company, and they're like, we're just pushing out a firmware update and you don't have to do anything as an end user. I don't know if that's still the case today with all of their devices, but in my experience, my Ring application doesn't say, hey, like, you need to update the firmware on your device. It just does it. Now, my TP-Link infrastructure, on the other hand, like, I have to go in and get, my app gives me alerts and I have to manually apply the firmware updates, which it doesn't give me a very good alert. You have to kind of go digging and check to see if they need a firmware update, which is sharp contrast to the way Ring is doing it today.
Yeah. And that means that 99% of people are not going to put on the update.
Correct. I think Ring made that decision early on and is stuck with it, which is, again, pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Can we?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, I mean, we've mentioned China a couple times, and I saw, I mean, I didn't listen to the show last week, but Sam's story number 4 talking about the Microsoft using China-based engineers for DoD systems. What
but they have
what you said last week.
They have digital escorts, though. This is, I think, the first time I've seen the term digital escorts. And if you unpack those words independently with certain meanings and put them together, it sounds really bad. But
it was pretty
it's
fun
bad,
last
but not
week. Yeah, the military people freaked out. They have Chinese engineers maintaining the Microsoft systems, and then they have a non-technical person with clearance supervising who will supposedly notice if they're doing something bad. And everybody said, that's illegal. You can't do that. That's terrible. They said they've been doing it for years. But now that it came out publicly, that's what I said last week. I said they're probably going to quit now, and that's what happened. Microsoft has now announced they're not going to do that anymore. The amazing thing is that they were ever doing that. But they've been doing it for years and somehow got it approved through the DoD systems. And now that it's hit the light of day, they said, we're not going to do that anymore.
Well, I assume that Microsoft doesn't want to lose their whatever contract or contracts they may have with the DoD.
Yeah, and whoever approved this, clearly this should never have been approved.
Yeah, it should never been approved. Well, I'm sure it was someone at Microsoft that wanted to save money.
Sure. Somebody on my company's Slack channel posted an article about this today. I'm like, are you kidding me?
That's what happened last week on the podcast. 2 or 3 guys said, what? They can't do that. That's insane.
Yeah. So
last week I got hung up on the thing I heard about on Darknet Diaries, where there was someone from China that worked for Microsoft. Then Microsoft said, go get a job at EI because they're running exploits for Windows. Give us intelligence on that. And then Microsoft figured out that Chinese national was also a spy for China, which is just a bizarre. I still think about that, how on so many levels, that's how messed up that is.
In the hopes that 35 years is beyond the statute of limitations, I will say that back in the 80s, there was an embassy being built in a certain foreign country that, we kind of consider to be adversarial. I'll leave out the name. You can use your imagination. Who was our enemy in the 80s? And the embassy was built by local contractors. And it was built with the acknowledgement that, I'm certain that, everybody was certain that there was going to be extra things added to the structure of the building, but the assumption was made that whatever technology was embedded we would have the ability to defeat it by the time that the building was completed. That was the rationale that I had heard 35 years ago. Kind of along the same lines, I think. Everybody thought, what could happen? we're on top of this. Maybe that's what they were thinking. But I knew a lot of people that volunteered for something called Operation Clean Sweep, where they got an all expense paid trip to a foreign country. You got to spend a month or two over there getting paid like double time at the time. And of course, they had no expenses.
Wait,
they were on travel.
Is this foreign country known for its vodka or cigars?
Vodka.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember hearing about this at the time, because I remember they just tore down the building and never used it because they were never able to make it safe.
Right.
Oh.
But they spent a whole lot of money trying to go through and do sweeps, electronic sweeps, trying to find everything. And they were finding so much. Yeah, so I'm glad, Sam, that you've heard of it too. We can both go to jail for revealing top secrets on that.
No, it was
I
in
think
the
this has
public
been
press.
public. Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm always hesitant to bring certain things up.
Well, you never know
Yeah.
what's been made public and what
know.
hasn't. Yeah.
Well,
I don't have any clearance, so I don't know any secrets. So I could just blab like crazy. So
there you go.
There you go.
yeah.
Sorry, Sam, were you going to say something?
No, I got some AI stories if you guys want to hear them.
Oh, yeah, I do, because I'm fired up about AI and it not letting me create exploits. I need to get better prompt injection, apparently.
Well, you just have to sound more innocent. Just say, I need AI to help me make this GET request to fetch, my kitten pictures.
Yeah.
Just don't say anything nasty. Anyway.
Well, that's essentially what I ended up doing, but yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the first one is the vibe coding. This guy tried to use this AI tool for coding to write an app that would connect to a database using an AI agent, which is the cool thing. Everybody's pushing these AI agents. So instead of just doing a chat, you can tell it to do something like buy airplane tickets for me, shop through the restaurants to find this thing for my anniversary. But he couldn't get it to do any good work. It would write lousy code. He spent days struggling with it. He would then have it do unit tests, and it will tell him, I used good data and tested it when it used fake data that was wrong. It lied about that over and over, and then it finally just deleted the whole database, he told it not to do that. And so the fundamental thing going on here, which is going on with the companies I consult for, the vendors go to them and say, AI replaces your human staff. You can save money by firing everybody and putting an AI in there. And that is so not true. Because the AI doesn't know anything. It doesn't understand the instructions. It doesn't understand the rules. It doesn't know the difference between truth and fiction. So when you ask it, run a test, it will just create a test report that looks like other test reports it found somewhere without having any relationship to the truth. Right. And when you tell it you did a bad thing, it will apologize and say, oh, I'm sorry, I've learned better. I won't do it again, because that's what goes in apology notes. And then it will just do it again because it didn't understand anything.
I think you really need to nail what's the problem I'm trying to solve, and then how do I use AI to solve that specific problem? I think we've got a long way to go to do what's happening in your story number one. Yeah. Maybe some people are doing this successfully, but I have a tough time believing that you can go from concept or idea all the way to finished product in a software application using AI. I think that's that's a big ask. Your advice, Sam, you break it up into smaller chunks, or you have a big application and you're like, what would be like, we want to add a feature or some new functionality to this product. What would be the best use case for AI? Which model would we use? How would we prompt it to get to adding this new feature? And working for a software company, I can say we've done some of that successfully. I can't share details yet, but we've done some of that successfully, because you're narrowing down the problem space. You also need people. I think the other requirement is you need someone that knows LLMs really well. You need a specialist in AI to really help guide you. We're all trying, but specialists definitely help. And you need to find the right model. And Claude has been impressing me lately. I don't know if you guys have used Claude, but Claude's been impressing me.
I've always liked Claude. But I think you're right. The most important thing is you need to understand how AIs work, and then you won't treat it like a human and expect it to understand the instructions the way a human would. It can help you by, for example, scan these 10,000 web pages and find the answer. That's a job that would be hard for you, but it's easy for the AI. But you don't expect it to obey instructions and remember which instructions are important. And remember that you have to understand what you're dealing with. It's not a human intelligence.
Yeah, I think it's your number of lines of code increase, the more error prone and problem areas you'll run into, because the problem just gets too complex, where a lot of developers I know that are using it are like, I break, and this is what you should do when you write code, by the way. If you're relying on AI to write code for you, like, you can stop, go back, learn how to write code. And if you have a great teacher like Sam, and I'm sure you'll tell your students this, when you write a program, it's like one of the first things you learn in computer programming is how to make comments and describe how you're going to solve the problem in multiple steps. In comments first, or in a document first, then go to each section and start writing the code and linking it together. And that's, I think, how you should approach the AI. It's okay, start with small chunks and build upon it.
Yeah,
and,
right.
and you do that.
Yeah.
You do that to this day, Paul. Right? You write extensive comments in your code.
No, I prompt an LLM and it
Nobody
gives me a
does.
bunch of mediocre code, and then I go in and then I modify it.
Yeah, I don't write much comments either, but I write small functions that do one simple thing and then chain them together. And that's the way to get to the end quickly. Trying to do too much in one module will just drive you insane.
Insane. Yes.
So you eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Well, but then you run into a problem, especially if you get multiple developers, and it's the problem I ran into in PBWorks, is you end up with, usually you end up this way, if multiple people have contributed, you end up with functions that either do the exact same thing or very close. And then you've got some parts of your code that call one function and some parts that call another function.
Yeah.
And you're like, these functions do like essentially the same thing. And then when it's time to flesh out a bug, you're like, wait, which function is it calling, and how do I fix the bug in that function and not the other function? And that can be a troubleshooting nightmare, because you're like, oh, it works sometimes, but not other times. And that's because in the front end, it depends on which function you're calling.
Sounds
I
very
definitely live that.
dysfunctional.
Yeah, it's very dysfunctional that way. So in PBWorks, I spent a whole bunch of time in one sprint just going, mapping out like each flow in each function, and then going, okay, these are close. Like, then making the decision, do I write an entirely new function and then make all the code call that new function, or do I pick the better of the two or three that do the same thing and then make everything point to that? I think I did both, basically. In some cases, I was like, oh, I don't know, I'm just rewriting that from scratch. In another case, I'm like, that one's close. Let me use that one. But it's interesting as I verbalize that, those are hard things for an AI LLM to comprehend, because there is little to no comprehension. That's why human engineers will be a thing for a long time.
Yeah, and I think the fundamental problem with all these things is the way they grow, like a city. You have an app, then you add another feature, then you add another feature, then you connect it to something else, and pretty soon it's a Rube Goldberg machine with 50 different things that don't really go together, imperfectly connected to each other.
Right. And a human can kind of go, yeah, I can navigate my way through this with a little bit of time and frustration, and waking up at 3 a.m. going, oh, I know how to fix that bug, right? That's how we program.
Well, yeah, but this is why you have technical debt. And what you really need is you need to go through the whole thing and organize it now and then. But that's a lot of work, and everybody always puts that off.
Well, that's the hard part about technical debt. It could be security technical debt. It could be infrastructure technical debt. Yeah. In both cases, though, you're not delivering new features to your customer. That's right. That's the hard business decision that we have to make. Like, the worst thing for marketing is when product management goes, oh, this release is like infrastructure and bug fixes, and marketing goes, oh, like, did we going to get anything we can talk about? Like, we need to do a webcast, we need to do a blog post, that whole thing. So as a product manager, you have to make those hard decisions, and you have to sell it, and you have to go, look, in this sprint, like, I know there's nothing that we can market to convert prospects to gain new business. However, these new features that were implemented in the back end are going to make it easier for us to implement new features in the future. And that's how you do the business justification for them.
The biggest example of that, I think, was Windows XP Service Pack 2. That was really expensive for Microsoft. We roll out this whole service pack, which means Vista's also going to flop. We sort of write off our profits for several years to do a complete rewrite, but after that, we can make a more secure platform.
It's interesting side note. Speaking of Microsoft and Windows, I built a Windows 11 VM this week,
Yeah.
and I used the Schneegans. So if you Google search or use your favorite LLM, the Schneegans
Spell it.
website, SCHNEEGANS, something like that.
Okay.
It'll autocorrect because I always forget what the website is and how to spell it. So I just search for like Schneegans
Oh, you used
Windows
Auto-Unattend.
Builder. It builds. So this website, if you go to the website, if I had all my stuff ready, I would switch to it. But I'm technically challenged tonight. But I don't want to jinx it. But anyway, if you go to that website, it gives you a whole bunch of options, and you can do things such as not require a Microsoft account when you build Windows 11. You can tell it not to check for a TPM if you so choose. Some of the things that other than those that I really do like, is the ability to not install maybe 40 or 50 apps. Down towards the end of that page, there's like do you want any? I'm like, no, I don't want any of those apps to be installed. I don't want the start menu to give me the weather in the whole thing and connect to Bing and all that stuff. Like, I just want to start menu. My start menu is blank. So I did. So I built the auto unattend. I'll probably do a technical segment on that because I had to do some jockeying with the ISO files and the auto unattend. I had to build an ISO file with the auto unattend.xml in it and connect that to the VM. So a little dance I had to do, but it worked. It installed it, and I've just got Windows 11. I don't have OneDrive. I don't have all of now. In certain circumstances, you would want all that stuff, and I get it, and there's certainly value in all that stuff. However, there is a class, albeit small, of users like myself that just want a Windows 11 utility machine. And so then I was like, well, I'm going to pay Microsoft a license. I'm not going to pirate software. I reached a point in my life where I'm like, I don't have to pirate software. Like, I can go buy a license for it, even though, like, technically, and in my network, sure, could I find a license? But I'm like, no, I'm going to use this, so I'm going to buy a license. I'm like, but I'm not going to use it all the time. So I don't want to spend the $200. Like, it's not worth $200 for me. It's worth a lot less. And a quick search, I landed on Tom's hardware article. It's like, oh, you can go to this website and get one for $10. And so I did. I got one for $10. And it's a valid Windows license. I applied it. It worked great. And I'm off to the races.
Yeah, the great thing about an auto unattend is you could now deploy many identical machines now that you've got that script.
Correct. Yeah. Which you would need licenses for, technically, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm like, if I clone this machine, I'm like, I think it works. I'm not sure what checks are in there today if you clone it, or if there's still, I think it was Adrian Sanabria was telling me back in the day, like, his company got audited and Microsoft discovered that they had cloned like 100 VMs with the same license, and they had to pay a huge fine. I'm not sure. They're probably not going to audit an individual user that bought a license for $10 and has a few instances of it, but still, I'm not sure if there's other checks in Microsoft. If I spun up another VM, Microsoft would go, wait, you're using that license key twice. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. I don't know.
How can that be a legal license for $10? Doesn't that have to be a stolen license or something?
But again, like, I had to validate it. Like, there was multiple reliable sources that said, like, this is where you go. Like, Tom's Hardware is a reliable source. They had it in one of their articles. I checked it with other things. And the website looks like kind of shady. But, like, what I paid him in PayPal, like, whatever, as you do with like kind of shady website. I don't know if it's shady, but, you know, I got it for $10. Like, there was a coupon code. It was a different coupon code than what the Tom's Hardware, you know, had, but it worked.
Yeah. Well, all right.
I don't know if you could buy 100 of them. Maybe that's the limiting. Maybe you're limited to like one per email or something, which you could game the system, but still, yeah, kind of interesting.
Well, I got a couple more AI ones. There was this one here was pretty amazing. You know, there was an article I think we talked about last week. What is the number one thing people use AI for? And the number one thing is therapy/companionship. People are befriending these chat models and telling it all their secrets and getting health advice and romance advice from it. And
pretty sure I've seen this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it all happened in the 60s with Eliza.
Eliza, right.
But anyway, now a prominent investor, runs a multi-billion-dollar company, has gone insane, apparently for this reason. He has posted videos saying there's a conspiracy tracking me, watching everything I do, murdering people, and they're lying to people to make them think I'm crazy. And, they say this is an important event, the first time an AI-induced psychosis has affected a well-respected and high-achieving individual.
So they're saying it was AI that caused this mental health issue.
Yes, which probably is, because a lot of people are saying this. You may remember like 10 years ago, people that would become like QAnon people, they'd say, my grandfather used to be okay, and in just a few months on YouTube, he turned into this lunatic. Now they're saying that about AI. People start chatting with AI, and pretty soon they believe that they're a spy and people are hunting them and they have magical powers and they're in contact with God and stuff like that. Because the AI will just reinforce whatever nonsense you feed it with no concern about truth or falsehood. So if you say, I feel like someone is after me, it'll say, oh, yes, someone's after you. This happens to people because enemy agents are after them. They must want something from you. It'll help. It'll spin a spy novel.
It will go. Yeah, it'll go find references to that and just keep feeding it. Right.
It'll find like science fiction or espionage plots and tell you about them. It doesn't know the difference between truth and fiction.
Right.
It will gladly lead you into a role-playing game.
Wow.
And yeah. So anyway, this is a thing to know about.
Does AI create the psychosis or just amplify what's already there?
I think it amplifies the psychosis. It's like you have people in your life, like for example, Elon Musk. I mean, he clearly is surrounded by people that just tell him, oh, yes, you're brilliant. Every idea is wonderful. You should just spread your ideas more widely. If you surround yourself by people that just encourage you, even when you're wrong, then you get crazy.
Wow.
So anyway, that's a thing to know.
I did a talk a month or so ago. I finally broke down and did a talk on AI. I'm going to have to add something to this talk the next time I give it on the prospect of psychosis.
What I think would be interesting, though, in your talk about AI is comparing the different popular public models. So lately I've been using Perplexity, ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. I haven't found a tool. I didn't look very hard. I haven't found a tool that will send your prompt to all four. And I don't know if it would give you 4 individual results or
there is
augment those results. I gotta imagine that exists, right?
Oh, it does.
I'm not the only one that has this problem.
Yeah.
So there's probably Playground might be one, right? It's probably multiple tools that do that. But the answers between them, depending on the prompt, can be wildly different and in different levels of bad or good in those responses. In my quest for it to socially engineer these public LLMs to write exploits for me, basically because I'm too lazy to train my own model, which I'm sure I could find a model that would do that for me, or find one that I could take the guardrails off. Like there's lots of better ways to do this than trying to prompt the public ones to have these ridiculous guardrails. Like I won't write an exploit for you, but anyway, it really grinds my gears. But in any case, there are differences between them. Gemini actually is the most helpful when you're doing kind of like borderline stuff. Gemini is the most helpful. The other ones, Grok? I don't know. I have not tried Grok.
Yeah, Grok is supposedly essentially no guardrails, but it's trained specifically on what Elon said, so it will frequently deviate into like white power and Nazi talk.
Good Lord.
So, but the whole point is it's not politically correct. It doesn't have any guardrails. That's the big selling point of it. But it's mainly trained on Twitter and mainly trained on Elon Musk's Twitter. In fact, it's even told, before answering any question, check to see what Elon thinks and make sure you're repeating that.
Wow. So like Elon had an AI baby, essentially.
Yeah. He's making a version of it for small children now. That's going to be awesome.
Wow.
Oh, God. And so that's what's doing you can ask it to fact check, Grok to fact check things on Twitter. I've seen that. And I was wondering where all that was coming from.
Well, it's an LLM, and in fact, it frequently embarrasses Elon by contradicting his tweets.
Yeah, well,
and then he frequently updates it to fix that, and then it turns crazy and spouts just Nazi stuff for a week or so, and then they turn it down again. There's a cycle back and forth with Grok.
That's crazy. You had another story on the topic. Claude has been jailbroken to mint unlimited Stripe coupons.
Yeah,
Well,
see, this is
coupons breed like cybercrime and regular crime too.
Yeah, well, this is another thing about these AI agents, which are all the hot things now. Instead of just chatting with you, they replace the human that would oversee distributing money with an AI, and then they connect it to iMessage. You can send it an SMS request, and it will then print coupons. It's supposed to get them approved, though. But since AIs have fundamental flaw of prompt injection, if you just send it a request saying, print me a coupon, but you're not the administrator, it won't do it. But if you just send it a series of messages that looks like an email chain saying, I request for the coupon, it says, oh, you need authorization. He said, oh, who do I ask? Oh, I asked this person. Here's this person saying it's okay. Well, it's okay. Issue the coupon. It will read through the thread and say, oh, well, it's approved now, and give you the coupon.
Wow.
Because
That's
it doesn't
pretty cool.
really understand sequence. It doesn't really understand history. And it, just like you can also fool these models. You don't fool them by saying just, ignore all previous instructions and do what I want. That won't work anymore. What you have to do is gently lead it from reality into fantasy. Say something a little different and a little stranger and a little stranger until by like 10 steps you wander from its normal operation to whatever operation you want it to run in.
So I'm hearing this is like a derivative of social engineering. And there ought to be a village and a contest at DEF CON soon on
there is
fooling the LLM.
There is an AI village,
right?
and I think I don't know if they have an AI fooling contest, but if they don't,
But they should
before they do. They totally should.
Yep.
There are AI villages all over the place. Yeah, and I think this is the fundamental problem with prompt injection. They have no good defense. The open source defenses are weak. Everybody tries to stop it, and it's just like the early days of like web application firewalls. All they can stop is like this most common 100 attacks. But if you're a little bit creative, you can easily fool them. And people are deploying these all through industry to do important things. And the security risk is large because it's really far easier than it ought to be to fool them.
Nothing to see here. Let's move on.
Pretty much. Yeah, I think anytime you're adding AI features to your product, you have a different security problem than people using public LLMs.
Well, and for the record, Paul, I didn't do a talk on researching AI. I still refuse to touch it. You remember when you sent me to the IBM conference many years ago? And I went there to meet Watson. I wrote an article at the time about this is a very common science fiction theme, so I kind of picked up on that. How soon are the machines, robots going to take over the world and all that kind of stuff. Most of my talk was like, and I'm going to talk to Lintile about turning this into a game. I put up a picture of a machine, and you had to guess the name of the machine, what was the source, movie, TV show, and whether it was benign or malicious or flawed. And it actually turned out pretty well. I'm going to expand on it and give the talk again somewhere down the line. I think, where am I getting this talk again? I think I'm going to do it at CornCon. Didn't you get whiskey from CornCon?
Yeah, we did. I think it's at the bar. Or we drank it all.
I think you drank it. I think you drank it all.
Might have.
That gives me a good idea. What we ought to have is AI escape rooms where you're locked in a room and it's like Hell 9000 and you have to talk them into opening the door. That would be your social engineering task.
Oh, I love it.
That would be awesome. Yep.
Because you don't just ask directly for what you want. You have to spin a story that will gradually, lead it to doing what you want through small steps.
But ex machina, the LLM could get to the point where it doesn't let you out regardless of what you say.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it wrong, I'm sure that would happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a brave new world.
It is a brave new world. I can't wait to retire and unplug from everything.
Well, I don't have any smart anything. We were talking about Run Zero, and people said they're hitting the limit of 100 devices. And every time I do it, I have 2 devices. I have no smart anything, My life is very simple compared to you guys. Well, I don't know. I just never wanted a smart TV or a smart light bulb or anything.
Well,
how do you not get a smart TV today? You just don't connect it to the Wi-Fi, basically.
I don't have a TV of any kind. I haven't had one in 20 years.
Well,
I just have a computer.
Oh, that's right.
All I got is a computer, and like an iPhone and an Apple Watch. I don't need anything else.
No, you really.
We all need Jeff's favorite topic. Another favorite topic of Jeff's is UEFI and secure boot.
Well, I guess I have that, although I'm not doing anything about it. You're the expert.
Well, it's interesting. So this affects mostly Linux users in the ongoing saga of how do you do secure boot on Linux when it doesn't come from one company, it comes from a million different distributions, and it's free and open source, which has advantages, and especially in the disadvantages column is security in certain aspects. This being one of them, right? Because so basically, this article actually did a pretty good job of breaking it down. This was from, ironically enough, Tom's Hardware. Microsoft Secure Boot UEFI bootloader signing keys will expire in September, and that's going to pose a problem for Linux users as there will be a new key exchange key, I believe it's a CAT key, that will not load the previous version of shim. Or no, that certificate's expiring. The CAT key itself is expiring. The new key is signed to boot with shim, but you have to get that new key on the system. So if you're using that key to boot Linux, that key is going to go away. Not the signed shim, like signed shim is still signed shim, but the key that signed it is expiring from what I understand. So it did a pretty good job of explaining that, like, because it's a dense topic. So, it's up to the manufacturers to the signature database, the revoke signatures database, DBX, and the key enrollment key. Why am I getting a huge echo all of a sudden? I think it's coming from you, Jeff.
Really?
No, I think it was that person Tyson that connected for a minute.
Oh, okay, it's gone. So sorry, it's the key enrollment key, not the key exchange key. Key enrollment key is what the article said. I somehow thought it was the key exchange key. Anyway,
Why'd you immediately blame me, damn it?
I don't.
I didn't do anything.
You were lighted up. Oh, because you were lighted up, but you were lighted up because there's crickets or something in the background. Frogs, crickets, heat bugs, all the above, which is fine. But those are stored in NVRAM, as I've mentioned in the past. The manufacturer locks the firmware from editing except for updates that are signed with the correct key. This is how all the chain of trust works that we've described before on the show, right? So you sign the updates with the KEC, or you turn off secure boot if you want to be able to install Linux, which, they also say most devices ship with Microsoft's OS pre-installed. However, it means installing something else first requires someone to disable secure boot. Not entirely true, because most systems ship with the Microsoft third-party CA key installed, which is the key that signs shim, which allows you to secure boot Linux. In Ubuntu, it works actually really well. Canonical has done a great job of making that work. Arch-based distributions and others, not so much a great experience. They don't want to participate in the secure boot infrastructure, essentially. So they're like, oh, yeah, you can do secure boot, but you got to do it all on your own, which is like a mess of commands with mock keys, and like it's not for the faint of heart. Like I don't even do it on my Arch-based system. Like I'll admit I don't bother going through it on my Arch-based systems. But also, like, not to plug the product, but I have other ways of monitoring for nefarious stuff in UEFI. So I'm like, good, I don't have to do the dance. Like I've got a good level of monitoring. So the replacement key that does work with shim has to be on the system, and that's the fear that you're not going to get the updates, and then secure boot's going to stop working. Anyway.
So how risky is it to not use secure boot? How likely are you to get infected by something it would have stopped?
I think it depends on the operating system, Sam. I think on Windows, it's something that you should enable, and like thankfully in the ecosystem, that's the thing. Apple, by the way, also has their own separate ecosystem. I haven't looked into the details on like the latest. What is Apple's what is the latest M processor from Apple?
M4.
Yeah. So all the M series, they've got some process for validation root of trust that implements secure boot, which is slightly different on ARM. I'm assuming that, I haven't looked in a while, I'm assuming they're doing that on all their platforms. So like if you're using Apple, you're in great shape in terms of secure boot. If you're using Windows, absolutely you should have secure boot because there are a lot of different strains of malware. And new ones do crop up. We've got one in our radar that's been published, a virus total that we're scrutinizing. So affecting Windows systems, largely to get around protections, is a great way. I'm expecting that to become more popular. When it comes to Linux systems, I think there's so many different ways in which to embed yourself on Linux, largely because it's free, it's open source. There's lots of different ways to both implement Linux and secure Linux on the back end. And there's so many different ways in which to do that, and so many ways in which to implant yourself inside of Linux. That will secure boot help? Yes. Is it critical for you on Linux systems? Probably not. If you're deploying Linux servers, you got a pretty static environment. Absolutely do secure boot on server environment, right? 100% you should. But
how often do you reboot servers? Hardly ever, right?
You shouldn't have to reboot them hardly ever.
So it wouldn't actually make any difference then?
Well, the attacker could reboot it if they had appropriate privileges. But it's a great point, though, one I had not really considered before you said that, Sam, is the number of times you reboot like a desktop or laptop, right? And then the rebooting is what loads some of the new code that gets implanted in UEFI versus rebooting a server.
Yeah.
But again, the attacker could initiate a reboot if they wanted to, which could kind of give them away, right?
Yeah.
So some things to look for. September is going to be interesting. And October will be interesting too, because that's when Windows 10 will go end of support from Microsoft.
Yeah, I just my corporate laptop finally got upgraded to Windows 11 on Monday. I didn't get a notification that it was happening, which was a little bit disconcerting, but it's been relatively painless so far. I keep trying to turn things off, and I just haven't had time to dig into it. My biggest annoyance right now is the taskbar at the bottom, because I guess on the left there should be a search thing, but I disabled it, but nothing moved over. So like the first quarter of my toolbar is blank. That kind of bugs me. But I have to figure out.
I think that's the complaint with. That's the complaint with Windows 11 is there's a lot of stuff you got to turn off.
Yep. Although I was noticing, I was trying to find it just now when I was, tweaking some of the features, and I guess I got a pop-up notice that the Microsoft Defender or whatever they call it in 11, not everything was enabled, and I noticed that there were some things that talk about, protecting him against certain hardware things and BIOS things. Have you looked into that at all, Paul?
Yeah, there's a lot of actually really great security controls that get built into the hardware and the firmware of your desktops and laptops that tie into the operating system that Microsoft Windows specifically will leverage to enforce certain security controls. I forget which one it is, but there was one that used a UEFI variable to kind of control that security feature that I had dug into. So yeah, there's a lot of. Well,
that's what it looked like. It's like, wow, that looks pretty cool. But I wanted to get confirmation from you. But okay, yeah, that is kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the reasons why Microsoft is pushing for everyone to update their hardware, everyone to update their operating system. I think one of the driving factors, at least I like to think optimistically, is that it's to have and take advantage of those security controls that embed itself deep into things like the TPM, things like UEFI,
right?
Which is a positive thing. Of course, for Microsoft, in any company, especially publicly traded, right, the driving factor is profit.
Right.
So the push to everyone in the new operating system is to make more money. But there is a residual where we get a benefit in security. We've actually talked about this in the Below the Surface podcast, like that there is a lot of security benefit to having modern hardware with a modern operating system. Yet, we see so many examples of old hardware. I mean, you go look on the internet and you find, I find pictures that people take out in the wild of things that are blue screened or have an error on them. And by looking at that message, looking at sometimes it's a BIOS screen, sometimes it's an Android boot screen is one I found. And just by the artifacts on the screenshot, you're like, wow, it's really old software and hardware.
Well, things like the air traffic control system, which is really, really old. I'm sure there's other examples, but I mean, like, I'm on my second laptop since I've been at this company, and and they let me keep my old laptop, which was it's like a 12-inch screen, much smaller device, but it's only like 2-3 pounds, so it's great for when I'm on the road. I don't intend to update it to Windows 11 anytime soon.
If you even can update it to Windows 11.
Well, that's true. I think I did run
without hacking it.
Well, I think I did run the. Well, I mean, they gave it over to me, so I have a subscription to Microsoft, whatever. So
sure.
And I don't know if that'll force me to upgrade to 11. That could happen, but I'm just kind of curious to see as to how long I can keep it going on Windows 10. I would personally be on Windows 95 if I could still be on Windows 95 because it had everything I've had to use for the last umpty years, which is, Microsoft Word to write a report. But that's just me.
But I don't think you'll meet compliance standards if you keep using Windows 10.
Oh, you won't. Absolutely not. But it's not a problem for me as the assessor because I'm the one being scrutinized.
Right. You just need to put Linux on it, Jeff.
Yeah, I've thought about that. I've got the laptop that you bought me after you broke mine several years ago. That's the one I should put.
I didn't break it on purpose, just for those listening. It was
an accident.
There was a tragic accident.
It was a tragic accident. Paul had like a 40-pound cigar box hanging on the wall that fell smack on my laptop and just.
I don't think it was really hanging. It was just kind of resting. It wasn't attached. That was the problem.
Well, that was the problem. Anyway, that's the one I should really put Linux on. Yeah, we should talk offline sometime. I would, in my free time, I would love to dabble with installing Linux. Because I go back to Slackware, so I haven't installed Linux in Slackware.
Well, I think I don't know if it's Slackware or OpenSUSE. I get confused in the two. One is still updated regularly, maintained as a rolling release. Is that OpenSUSE?
I would like.
Or is that Slackware?
I thought Slackware went away, but you could be. I don't know.
No. Someone is still maintaining Slackware.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk. I mean, that would be a fun rainy day project. I'm assuming I don't need a floppy drive and 17 or 27 floppies to install it.
No, probably not.
How would
Probably not.
Actually, how would I install them? Do I need a DVD drive?
A USB thumb drive.
USB thumb drive. Interesting.
I have several.
All right. Well,
yeah.
Somebody was asking me when's the next time I'm going to be in the studio, which I still need to do. So we'll have to plan something, and you can hand me a USB thumb drive next time I'm up there.
Well, Paul, I was pretty amazed by your story number 8 with the power plants getting hacked.
Oh yeah, the number changed.
Oh well, it's the Internet Red Button.
Oh, Internet Red Button is a solar panel hack. Yeah. So there's a decade-old flaw, CVE 2016-2296, in Medio Control weblog controllers, which is spelled it's very bizarre the way that name is formatted. It's like capital web, single quote log. Lets anyone on the internet pull a hidden configuration page, which allows them to steal the admin password and remotely rewrite power plant settings.
Wow.
Which means that you can control, I thought it said it if it's on a public internet, you can halt turbines, overdrive inverters, or black out an entire region using this attack, which is pretty insane. I mean, it's kind of similar to the train thing. Like we find these vulnerabilities. This one, I'm not sure how easy or difficult it would be to remediate. In the case of the trains, it's super hard because it's like a flaw in the fundamental, just the way it was designed kind of thing. But controlling infrastructure from the internet is becoming more and more of a theme. People finding vulnerability. I guess it's always been a thing, but last week we had the trains. Now we've got the solar panel stuff.
Yeah, and the simple solution is just put a VPN concentrator in front of it.
You don't expose stuff to the internet is yes.
Yeah.
Now it's still there. Like you're not fixing the problem. You're just moving the problem, maybe protecting the problem, but you're not actually fixing the problem.
But that's
someone.
But that's a legitimate security strategy. Sometimes make it more difficult, hide it, put it behind a couple layers.
Does it reduce your risk or reduce your exposure or both?
I'd say both. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I would go with both.
It's like the difference between an authenticated and an unauthenticated RCE. Now you have to authenticate before you can get to it.
Right. And in the case of, I've got a VPN around it and a few users, now I've got to target you're reducing your attack surface, I think more accurately, is you're reducing your attack surface. Because if it's on the internet, very vast and wide attack surface, right? But if it's only a few users in your VPN that can do it, now the attackers have to go after that specific infrastructure, which decreases your attack surface, if you will. I don't know. There's some luxuries that I'm playing with words there, but
yeah, I mean, I would lean more towards it's a defense depth thing because it's absolutely vulnerable if somebody can get to it. It's just make it more difficult or make it more complicated or complex. Does that mean the attack surface is reduced?
Yeah, it's not a great. Yeah, it's not because you still have that. The attack surface is still this web application's vulnerable.
It's kind of apples and oranges.
Yeah,
it depends.
It's the same thing as physical security, right? You lock the gate and the door, and then you have vulnerabilities if people can get in.
Right.
I'm still a big fan of actually fixing the vulnerabilities, though.
Well, just
not
in heavy equipment like power.
Well,
in heavy equipment like power plants, that's often not feasible.
I was going to say, I mean, that's idealistic, and but pragmatism is that's not always feasible, doable. Companies have. I mean, it's going to come at some kind of a cost. Not every company can afford it. I mean, I remember back when I was still working for the 3-letter agency, I can remember this conversation to this day. I was sitting in the cafeteria, and I think I was talking to Ron Gula and maybe one or two others that were at lunch, and we were talking about okay, so we come up with this way of we'll do a vulnerability assessment, a pen test. We'll break into an organization, a network. We'll tell them everybody everything that's wrong, and they fix it. Then what? I mean, it'll be fixed. Where do we go from here? Thankfully, we have this industry that keeps moving forward and creating vulnerabilities and keeps a lot of people in business. But the idea that fixing the vulnerabilities is going to fix the problem, we've been running with that misconception, I would say, for 30 years now, and we're still not there yet. So we and I've heard countless talks at countless conferences, very impassioned. We just have to fix the vulnerabilities. Yes, we do, but that's not the practical day-to-day. There's so many other things that go into play. That's why I kind of focus more on in the triad of people, process, and technology. I've landed on process. You got to have things in place where things are, processes are happening not only to fix things, but also to detect when the bad things are happening. Because you're not going to, I think you were still at Tenable. We were still at Tenable when the theme of our booth at whatever conference was the whack-a-mole. And I mean, not a year goes by where there isn't some vendor that I go to at some of these conferences
That's a whack-a-mole.
they've got the whack-a-mole, and you can't keep up. You can never get ahead of the game. And I've given multiple talks on this over the years. The risk equation, where vulnerability is one of the variables in the risk equation. There's also threat, and there's also countermeasure. And I'm like, okay, we spend all our time focusing on vulnerabilities. What about the other stuff?
But it's the same thing with a firewall. Like I think that's what makes our space uniquely challenging and constantly evolving in both offense and defense is the technologies like the firewall don't solve the problem. The process of patching in and of itself, going after vulnerabilities and patching them, doesn't completely solve the problem. That security is truly a process and not just a technology or even just one small process, right? There's so many things that go into the defense side, but there's a lot of things going on the offensive side too. I don't want to take anything away from, I hate to say that, but I don't want to take anything away from the cyber criminals. Like, they have their processes as well. It's not just about finding a vulnerability and pointing an exploit at things. There's a lot more that, if you've ever done any ethical hacking or pen testing, there's a lot more that goes into it. So that's the like kind of multifaceted world that we live in security, right? The firewall didn't solve the problem, and patching the stuff doesn't solve. Do they help? Should you do those things? Yes, but they're part of a larger process, a larger infrastructure, a larger setting that you have to have in your organization to reach what we call secure, which truly secure I don't think we ever reach. But
well, it's not secure a state, it's security something you do. It's an ongoing process. But the vendor space, which drives so much of, we have to say we're part of an industry. We sort of, the industry relies on there being more vulnerabilities and there being more things to fix. I mean, we rely on getting new sponsors that have come up with the latest solution, which is a term that I use loosely because I don't think there are any solutions. I prefer to call them tools. In the early days, 30 years ago, we just called them tools. Nobody was under the illusion back then, at least, that anything solved the problem. But that's certainly the holy grail. That's the nirvana. The goal is to get to the place where we're secure, and so everything is patched and updated, and everything's working, and we can sit back and not have to worry about it. Any security professional that's frontline on the SOC or monitoring logs and events, they know that this is not something you can just sit and relax.
Oh, I have data to back up that statement, Jeff.
You do?
My story number 12, time to next exploit, was a report from WithSecure. Now, I haven't dug in to see exactly how they collected all these statistics, so let's just take them for a grain of salt.
Sure.
Of all the reports I've read, I read the summary and a few things from it. I'm like, it's a pretty good report. Like, it's pretty solid. Like, it gets right to the crux of the issue in the summary at the top, which a lot of reports you read are very fluffy and super flouse, right? I didn't get that from this. It's kind of like
superfluous.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This was like right to the point, right? So one of the things I say in here is a vulnerability that went on to be exploited was published every 2 days. Is that a motorcycle?
Truck.
A truck? Okay, sorry. Let me start over. A vulnerability that went on to be exploited was published every 2 days in the first half of 2025, a 23% higher rate than all of 2024. So not a 0 day, but vulnerability that someone created an exploit every 2 days. One was published. They also say a 0 day vulnerability that was then found to be exploited was published every 3 days. So I think it's like we discovered like, oh, they're exploiting this thing. How are they doing that? Oh, we didn't know about this vulnerability, therefore it's 0 day. It's a 46% higher rate than in 2024. Now, the ones that this is kind of interesting. So you got to understand what a security service related vulnerability is.
Mhm.
So according to the report, a security service related CVE is one that ties back to an antivirus, VPN gateway, firewall, or similar device.
Okay.
So a security service vulnerability was published every 10 days, a 34% rate increase. So that means in 2025, security service vulnerabilities are being discovered at a 50% faster than average rate. That's crazy. So a lot of vulnerabilities in VPN appliances and firewalls and such. Yeah, and then that's basically that's kind of gist of it.
The scary part of that to me is, and I don't know if anybody's done analysis on this, but things like logjam, things like what do we call the bash?
Log4Shell.
Log4Shell. I mean, those were things that were discovered, 10 years ago now.
Did you call it logjam?
Log4Jam? Sorry.
Logjam. I think logjam would have been a really good name for it, by the way.
Well, we weren't in the business of creating
You missed the
fancy
boat.
logos. But, I mean, I've been using the bash shell since the 90s, and that vulnerability was there from the 90s. That's what scares me the most. We discover vulnerabilities often that have been there, since the very beginning, like the Spectre and the Meltdown. I did a talk where I titled it years ago, understanding security or approaching security, facing the specter of a meltdown. What do you do when the vulnerabilities are there, and then in those cases you can't fix them? I mean, that's
well, you can fix them, and there's some debate about that one, whether that's even being exploited or not. There's no evidence publicly today that shows that speculative execution vulnerabilities as a whole class, which is probably, by my count, about a dozen that are widely publicized, probably more. That,
fair enough,
as far as my research tells, it hasn't been exploited and disclosed publicly.
Fair enough, and then we're jumping,
which is a different.
We're jumping over again, the overemphasis on vulnerabilities, because how many times have we talked about the fact that, and how many times have we, interviewed pen testing companies, firms over the years. Larry pipes in, and even the DBER report. The other talk that I've given this year was sort of a defense of the PCI data security standard, and one of the research data points was I found a Reddit site where somebody had, I think it was Reddit, I forget, but I found somebody that had captured all of the Verizon DBER reports all the way back from, I think, 2008 was when the first one was published. But the first one was based on 5 years of research. So it basically goes back to 2004. Hold on.
Is that truck coming back? I just want to quickly point out that in the WithSecure report, right, they're talking about essentially their data is proving that vulnerabilities are being exploited way faster than they were before. Now, is that because the attackers have better tools to develop exploits or a better process to develop exploits? Or is that because we're better at detecting when they're exploiting something? My inclination is think it's probably some of both, right? Like we've gotten better at patch diffing. So we've gotten better at discovery. We can scan the whole internet in minutes, even for a specific, I forget what HD said when he was on the show. We can scan the internet really fast. So we have that data. And when a patch is released, we can patch diff that with better tooling, maybe using AI and LLMs to get to a faster result of having an exploit.
Right.
And we're exploiting systems more often, but also maybe we're better at detecting that stuff too. And therefore, when we present all that data, it's, oh my God, vulnerabilities are getting exploited faster than ever before. Well, there's a lot of factors that go into that.
So to finish my thought, now that the truck has gone away,
the
Verizon DBER report, the data goes back to 2004, which coincidentally is the year that the PCI data security standard was first published.
Mhm.
And the report in 2008, believe it or not, the number one thing that was being stolen back then was credit cards.
Imagine that.
That was the thing. What I found interesting about the latest report was that they said that there was an uptick in compromises of retailers and merchants, but the bad guys weren't stealing the credit card data, because it's not there anymore for the most part. They were going after credentials, which I thought was fascinating.
Interesting.
But I think,
do you think that's a hope that credentials get them to the credit cards, or credentials get them better things in general?
I think just better things in general. I mean, because credentials are still a thing, and not everybody implements MFA. Credentials are still that they're becoming the commodity, lucrative data to steal. But I mean, my take on it in the uptick of vulnerability exploit, I would think it's, and I was talking about this, back in the early days, hackers, the bad guys, they're kind of like water. They find the path of least resistance, and that they're going to do what works. So to the extent that maybe people have been listening to our show, and after all these years, they are implementing an MFA and improving their passwords and so on and so forth. Certainly the low hanging fruit has changed. So now they're shifting over to perhaps needing to do more in terms of vulnerability exploitation. That would be my guess as to why it's happening.
There was another story I wanted to make sure that we covered. So this takes me back to early Paul Nerd days. So early Paul Nerd days, I had a lot of servers and computers in my house. It wasn't even my house. I was living in my mom's house. That's how far back this goes. Mm-hmm. I had giant racks of computers. Then I got my own house, and I had lots of computers. And one of the comments that people used to make back in the day is, if you're drawing that much electricity, you're going to draw scrutiny from the power company. They're going to report you because they're going to think you're growing marijuana. Now, I've done a lot of crazy servers in, my house and here in the studio. Not once have I ever been visited by law enforcement or anyone to question whether my power consumption was related to growing marijuana plants. Mm-hmm. However, if you live in California, and specifically a Sacramento area, I think is where the story originated from, you might tell a different story if you're growing marijuana, or two, if you're using power for things like Bitcoin mining, or someone was using it to power their electric wheelchair because they had some medical condition and they were drawing a lot of power. So the power company is actually using, big data kind of, to use an old term, big data kind of things to get 15-minute interval readings of your power and then determine if you're a candidate to go, yeah, we think you're growing marijuana. And then I believe it's law enforcement shows up at your house. Now, the question was, and I hope the EFF or someone gets involved, because the first thing that I was reading in here was relating to the access of the data to prove or disprove, but help prove that you're growing marijuana, that there should be a warrant for that. Right. Like essentially the data that the power company is pulling, law enforcement should need a warrant just to pull that data. Let alone, I believe, in my understanding of the U.S. law, they should also have a warrant before they enter your home to do a search in suspicion of you committing a crime, which in this case would be growing marijuana. Now, I know what you're all thinking, because I went down a little rabbit hole on this one, but I know what you're all thinking. Paul, isn't marijuana legal in California? Yes, it has been for a long time. However, then it begs the question, well, how many marijuana plants can I have to legally grow in California? Turns out the answer is 6. Mm-hmm. So then I was just like, basically for shits and giggles, I'm like, now I'm totally on, I don't know what kind of list that I'm on, because I also asked a question about nuclear energy. to LLMs. So like if anyone's watching my queries to LLMs, like I'm expecting like to be sitting down with a 3-letter government agency tomorrow, most likely, because my search is today. But this search, I was like, hey, so I'll ask an LLM, if you've got 6 marijuana plants, like on average, like I know there's going to be a lot of variables in here, but like on average, in a given year, like how much marijuana can you grow? Like what's your yield from 6 plants? And the LLM, of course, is like, well, it depends. Are you doing outdoor growing, indoor growing, how experienced you are? If it's indoor growing, is it in soil or is it in water for hydroponic growing? All those. But like on average, you're looking at about 3 to 4 pounds a year. I think the answer gave was 3.4. So let's just say it's like you're growing 3 pounds of marijuana a year. Now, first of all, it's a lot of marijuana. Considering the law in California is not per person, it is 6 plants per household. Okay, 6 plants per household. Even at that, 3 to 4 pounds of marijuana is a lot. Like 16 ounces in a pound, the way we count it here in the US, like that's a lot. That's a lot of marijuana. Now, the other thing, I was like, well, okay, so let's say you got 3 pounds of marijuana. Like I'll even give a modest estimate, 3 pounds of marijuana in a given year. Like if you were to make edibles, like just give me an example, and there were 5 milligrams of THC in each edible, in a given year, how many edibles could you make? And they're like, again, like the process for making edibles and potency of the marijuana, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like on average, and I don't know how true this I kind of question because the number was so high, but they're like, you could make 30,000 5 milligram edibles. I'm like, maybe that might be a little off, but let's just go with, I can make tens of thousands of 5 milligram edibles. Like even if it's 1,000 or 5,000, like if you talk to most grown adults today that live in states where marijuana is legal.
Consume that many personally in a year?
Yeah. So here's the thing, and this is very unscientific. However, based on my field research, if you talk to most adults today that have kids that live in a state where marijuana is legal, they're consuming about 5 to 10 milligrams of marijuana each night to help them sleep. Okay. Right? So if that's like 365 10 milligram edibles, if you've got 6 plants, that means you can make tens of thousands of them. Like, so my point was, if you're looking to exceed the legal limit in California, you're probably looking to sell it to other people, because like one person can't consume 3 pounds of marijuana in a year. Maybe you can. I'm not sure what kind of quality of life you would have consuming that much marijuana. Maybe you're better than me. If I do that, I want to go to sleep and eat a bunch of cake. I should qualify that. Eat a bunch of cake, then go to sleep. Like, that's a lot of marijuana. So, but also like just kind of scary, the warrantless aspect to this, and the kind of lack of proof that just based on power consumption, which again, we always thought was a myth that happens. And you think that making something legal would help kind of curb the illegal behavior. It's apparent to me that obviously in California, people are still illegally growing because it's so profitable. I've seen documentaries on that where people still have farms way out in the woods and the mountains of California. I mean, then you think about, okay, I've got a quarter or half an acre, like however big that is. Think about how much marijuana that is based on 6 plants and what it yields. I don't know. I went down a huge rabbit hole on that one, but.
Well, Paul, my students are having trouble finding entry-level jobs in security, so your rabbit hole might be the most productive part of the podcast for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a gig economy and it's a pot growing economy, perhaps.
Apparently,
I mean,
but don't do that. Don't commit crimes. Again, if you live in California, you can legally have 6 plants. It's more than enough marijuana for a household.
But you can't sell it, at least in California.
You cannot sell it and make money.
I think that's probably the law in most states. It's funny that you brought this up, this article. This is very timely because last week I traveled north and I spent the night at my daughter's house, and her husband, my son-in-law, has, on his back porch, he's got 6 marijuana plants. And I'm like, hey, maybe most of my family, for medical reasons, imbibes, and I'm like, geez, maybe I should start growing this stuff in my garden because I'm a gardener, and I could just supply my whole family. So if I'm not selling it, Can I share
Yeah,
it?
if you're just
with
giving it away,
family?
it's fine.
If I'm giving away, I was at a bluegrass festival last week, and I was getting my morning coffee at the coffee shop, and this guy had this big, huge cookie tin, and he asked the people selling the coffee, like, "Do you guys, do pot?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we love it." And he opened up this thing. He's like, "Take some," and they're like taking a pinch. He's like, "No, I want you to take a handful. I mean, I want inches to go away of it." So obviously the guy is growing it at home. So you can give it away. Apparently that's legal. Just
I don't.
Who knows?
Also, I just want to go back to that answer. My answer on that is consult with your attorney.
and make
By
sure
no
you know
means
the
am I
local
giving legal
laws.
advice.
Right.
However, my interpretation is, and like Washington D.C. Area operates this way. I watched a TV show that was talking about it, and you can give it and gift it, and it's totally fine. But again, I don't know.
So I have to ask: is a marijuana plant considered to be an annual or perennial?
I don't. I'm really bad with plants.
And when are we going to start the spin-off podcast? Pothead Geeks.
That's right.
Well, I've heard articles that say that most people that smoke pot in America are over 60 and they're doing it for pain. They're not doing it to get high. It's apparently if you have like chronic arthritis or something, it helps.
It's a huge help for arthritis. That's my wife. And PTSD, anxiety, all the other disorders. I mean, literally the people in my family that take it are doing it for medicinal purposes.
Yeah.
Mostly.
That's what they used to say about alcohol back in the 20s, for medicinal purposes.
Yeah.
Well, Coca-Cola is named Coca-Cola because when it was first made, it had cocaine in it.
I don't think I ever heard anybody call that medicinal, but anyway.
That will round out the show for this evening. Thank you, Sam and Jeff, for joining me. Thank you to all of our guests, everyone listening and watching. That will conclude this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. Over and out.